Okay, we're back. We'll do section 4.3, and eventually we're going to get into some minimization problems. I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to follow the book, and I'll tell you why I am. This is not how I have taught it before, and they're going to throw some different things at you. And I think it might be better if I follow a little closer, because your test questions and your homework will be based off of this rather than what I would show you. And to be truthful, it's probably going to be a little bit easier for you. Okay, so starting out, in 4.2 we developed the simplex method, and then we did some problems. Now, here's the thing. That method only works when certain things are true. Okay, number one, the objective function is something we're trying to maximize. Each of the individual variables have to be greater than or equal to 0. So like x is greater than or equal to 0, y is greater than or equal to 0, and if need be, the z is greater than or equal to 0. And then each of the constraints has to be greater than or equal to some non-negative number. Without those three things being true, then we can't use the simplex, at least not as we showed it. So I'm going to show you some wrinkles tonight. So before I get showing the example, let's look at this. Let's say I've got this situation here. That's one of our constraints. See anything wrong with it? Think about what we're doing up here. Well, this is going to violate right here. The constraint must be less than or equal to some non-negative number. So right there I got a -2. You can't do it. So it didn't fit with these, so we can't use the simplex method, at least not using what we did before. Here's another example. Let's look at this one. This one says 2x plus 3y greater than or equal to 5. Anything wrong with that? If I is positive, we're okay, but the problem is that should be less than or equal to. Now here's the trick. I can make it less than or equal to. If you multiply through by -1, -1 times 2x is -2x, -1 times 3y is -3y, -1 times 5 is -5, and then the sign, whenever you multiply by a negative, it flips around. So it was greater than or equal to here. Here it's less than or equal to. Okay? But we created another problem. If you look right here, remember you can't have a negative number over there. So with that said, we're going to go back. And this part right here, we're going to change. It says each constraint must be less than or equal to some non-negative number. We're going to take that out, and we're going to put this in its place. Constant. So each of the constraints have to be less than or equal to some constant. So rather than being non-negative, it's a constant. Okay, what's a constant? Well, math-wise, that just means a number. But it could be any number now. Okay, so the first part of this lesson is being able to take maybe our constraints that are not in the form we want and putting them in the form we want. Okay. Get a drink here. Okay, so let's look at this example I've got. Same what's in the book. So I want to maximize 5x plus 10y, and here's my constraints. So the first thing we have learned is we want to look at these and make sure they are in the correct form. Here I've got x plus y less than or equal to 20. That's okay. It's less than and it's positive. I go to the second one, I got 2x minus y is greater than or equal to 10. Okay, we got a problem with that one. And then here you got x greater than or equal to 0, y greater than or equal to 0. Okay, so the second inequality is not the correct form. What we did before on the other page is I multiplied everything by -1. And when you do that, the 2x becomes negative 2x. The minus y becomes y. The 10 becomes negative 10. And the greater than or equal to becomes less than or equal to. So my constraints, I had x plus y less than or equal to 20. I still have that down here. That wasn't the way we wanted, so I made this negative 2x plus y less than or equal to 10. So that's a new one, and I still have both of those guys. Okay. So now I'm ready to set up my matrix. Same thing I did before. I got 1, 1, and 20. 1, 1, and 20. Negative 2, 1, and negative 10. Negative 2, 1, and negative 10. From my profit function, I got negative 5 and negative 10. Notice in the middle, you've got your identity. And then over here's your constants. And 0 is always at the lower right-hand corner. Okay, now pay attention. This is going to be a little different. Since we have a negative over here, we're going to look at this row. This is how you find the pivot. When I go across here in this row, I'm looking for a negative. The negative's right here. That tells me I'm going to look at this column. That's my pivot column. That's different. I didn't find the biggest negative. I found the pivot column by locating where the negative in that row was. Now find your ratios. Okay, I'm going to take 20 over 1, and that's 20. This is going to be negative 10 divided by negative 2, and that's going to be 5. We don't look at the bottom one. Okay, so smallest positive tells us that this is going to be my pivot row. Now, it just happens to be the one with the negative, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. Okay, you know what's next. We got to get a 1 where the negative 2 is. So we're going to take negative 1/2 times row 2. Now, if you're following the book, they left a step out. Top row is going to stay the same. Second row, negative 1/2 times negative 2 is 1. Negative 1/2 times 1 is negative 1/2. 0. Negative 1/2. 0. And this is going to be 5. And the bottom row stays the same. And I should circle that because that's going to be my pivot. So notice that was a little bit different. I had to locate the negative here, and then I went across to find the other negative, which is right here. So it's like you got to eliminate the negatives before you can follow our normal rules. Okay, but anyway, that's the pivot. I'm down to here. Now I'm going to get zeros. So to get a 0 here, I'm going to take negative row 2 plus row 1. So negative 1 and 1 is 0. Negative 1/2. So that's 2 negative makes it positive. Positive 1/2, think of that as 2 halves. So 1/2 and 2 halves is 3 halves. 0 and 1 is 1. This is going to be the opposite of negative 1/2 is positive 1/2. Wait a second, I just missed something here. No, I didn't. So that's what positive 1/2 and 0 is 1/2. 0 plus 0 is 0. And then negative 5 plus 20 is 15. Second row stays the same. And then we go to the bottoms. So we're going to multiply by 5. So that's 5 times row 2 plus row 3. 5 times 1 is 5, plus negative 5 is 0. 5 times negative 1/2, that's going to be negative 5/2. Think that is negative 20 over 2. 20 over 2 and 10, same thing. So I got negative 5 and negative 20. That's negative 25 over 2. 0 and 0 is 0. That's going to be 5 times negative 1/2 is negative 5/2, plus 0 is negative 5/2. 0 and 1 is 1, and 5 times 5 is 25, plus 0 is 25. Okay, now what? Well, now we're following the same rules we did before. Biggest negative. So that gives me this column. So 15 divided by 5/2, that's the same thing as 2/3 of 15. That one's going to be 10. 5 divided by that's a negative number. I'm not even going to look at that one, and that one's going to be negative. My smallest positive has to be 10. We wouldn't consider a negative, so I didn't figure that out. So the top row, I've got to make that into a 1. So I'm going to take 2/3, row 1. 2/3 of 0 is 0. 2/3 of 3/2 is 1. 2/3 of 1 is 2/3. 2/3 times a half is 1/3. 2/3 of 0 is 0, and 2/3 of 15 is 10. Row 2 stays the same. Row 3 stays the same. Okay. Moving on. So I've got the 1, top row is going to stay the same. So to get a 0 here, I'm going to take 1/2 row 1 plus row 2. 1/2 times 0 is 0, plus 1 is 1. 1/2 times 1 is a half, plus negative 1/2 is 0. 1/2 times 2/3 is 1/3, plus 0 is 1/3. 1/2 times 1/3, that's going to be 1/6, plus negative 1/2. Think of that as negative 3 over 6. So I got 1 over 6 and negative 3 over 6. That's negative 2 over 6, which is negative 1/3. 1/2 of 0 is 0, plus 0 is 0. 1/2 of 10 is 5. 5 plus 5 is 10. And now we go to the bottom row. So I've got to multiply by 25 over 2 times row 1. Add that to row 3. 25 over 2 times 0 is 0, plus 0 is 0. 25 over 2 times 1 is 25 over 2, plus negative 25 over 2 is 0. 25 over 2 times 2/3. The 2's drop out. That's going to be 25 over 3. Now it's going to get a little crazy. So to get the next one, I'm going to take 25 over 2 times 1/3 and add that to negative 5 over 2. So that's 25 over 6 plus, If I get that over 6, common denominator, multiply by 3, so that's negative 15. So that's 10 over 6, which is 5 over 3. That's what I put here. So when you get the tough ones, just get some scrap paper, come off to the side and do that. Luckily, they're not all like that. And zeros makes work a lot easier. 25 over 2 times 0, 0 plus 1, that's still 1. And 25 over 2 times 10. 2 goes into 10 5 times. 5 times 25 is 125. Plus 25 here gives me 150. So my max is 150. Maximum profit, if you want to think of it that way, and that's dollars. X is going to be what? Well, notice where here's the X, there's the Y. 1. X is going to be 10. Y just happens to be 10 also. So you could think of that as 10, comma, 10 if you wanted to. Okay, I'm going to quit there. That ends part 1. I'll come back with part 2 shortly.